No one could enter the cursed chamber until a human janitor walked in eating a sandwich. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The Galactic Archive Station floated in the void between stars, a monument to 30,000 years of collected knowledge from across 17 galaxies. Its corridors gleamed with polished metals from 100 worlds, and its halls echoed with the whispers of scholars from countless species. But in the deepest level of Sub-Basement 9, behind walls inscribed with warnings in 412 languages, sat a chamber that had remained sealed for 3 centuries. That was, until Ethan Cole walked past it on a Tuesday afternoon with a turkey sandwich in one hand and a mop bucket in the other. The Galactic Archive Station employed beings from across known space. Scientists, researchers, archivists, linguists, xenoanthropologists, and historians filled its upper levels. But down in the maintenance departments, in the forgotten corridors where few scholars ventured, worked the cleaning crews. Humans had joined the Galactic Federation only 70 years prior, and they were still considered somewhat primitive by most species. Not unintelligent, exactly, but lacking the refined sensibilities of older civilizations. They ate strange foods, made odd jokes, and had an unsettling tendency to treat dangerous situations with baffling casualness. Ethan Cole was 32 years old, with sandy brown hair that never quite stayed neat, blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and the sort of build that came from years of physical labor rather than calculated exercise. He had worked as a janitor on the archive station for 3 years, taking the job after his contract with a mining colony ended. The pay was decent, the hours were reasonable, and nobody bothered him much. He could listen to music while he worked, eat whenever he wanted, and most of the aliens he encountered treated him like living furniture, which suited him fine. On this particular Tuesday, Ethan was running behind schedule. His supervisor, a Velnari named Kix with 4 arms and a perpetually anxious expression, had asked him to clean Sub-Basement 9 by the end of his shift. Sub-Basement 9 was one of the least visited areas of the station, home to old storage rooms, defunct equipment, and sections that had been sealed off for various reasons. It was also, coincidentally, where they kept the cursed chamber. Ethan had heard about the cursed chamber, of course. Everyone on the station had. It was the subject of hushed conversations in the break rooms and ominous warnings during orientation. The chamber had been sealed 300 years ago after the last team that entered it had emerged with half their members dead and the survivors driven to madness. Since then, dozens of attempts had been made to breach the chamber again. Every single attempt had ended in disaster. The Trilaxians had sent their finest warriors, beings who could survive in hard vacuum and fight off entire armies. They made it 3 steps into the chamber before fleeing, screaming about visions of their own deaths. The Mindari, a species of powerful telepaths, tried to probe the chamber mentally from outside. 2 of them fell into comas that lasted months. One never woke up. The Vorin, mechanical beings made of living metal, attempted to send in drones. The drones melted into slag before crossing the threshold. Over the centuries, the chamber had gained a fearsome reputation. It was said to be protected by ancient technology beyond current understanding, or haunted by malevolent entities from before the Federation existed, or cursed by a dying civilization that wanted their secrets to remain buried forever. Scholars debated the nature of the protection. Religious leaders called it divine punishment. Military strategists considered it the perfect defense system. Whatever it was, everyone agreed on one thing. The cursed chamber was absolutely, unquestionably impossible to enter. Ethan knew all this. He had sat through the same safety briefings as everyone else. But he had also been working double shifts for the past week. He was hungry, and his feet hurt. When he pushed his mop bucket down the corridor toward the old storage rooms and saw the chamber's door standing there, sealed and imposing, covered in warnings and ancient symbols, he simply did not have the energy to care very much. He had brought his dinner with him because he had not had time to eat during his break. It was a simple turkey sandwich on wheat bread with lettuce, tomato, Swiss cheese, and just a little too much mustard. He had bought it from the station's human-run cafeteria on level 23, and it was slightly squashed from being in his pocket, but it tasted fine. Ethan walked past the cursed chamber, taking a bite of his sandwich. He needed to mop the corridor, check the storage rooms, and then he could finally go home. He was thinking about whether he had any beer left in his quarters. He was pretty sure he had drunk the last one on Sunday, but maybe he had missed one in the back of the fridge. He pushed the mop bucket right up to the chamber door without really looking at it, set it down, and took another bite of his sandwich. Then he turned and actually registered what he was looking at. The door was massive, at least 12 feet tall and 8 feet wide, made of some dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Symbols covered every inch of it, glowing faintly with a sickly green light. In the center was a seal, a complex geometric pattern that hurt to look at directly. Warning signs in dozens of languages surrounded the door, all saying variations of the same thing: keep out. Sealed by order of the Federation Council. Breach forbidden. Extreme danger. Ethan chewed his sandwich thoughtfully. He had been explicitly told during his orientation never to go near this door, never to touch it, never to even think too hard about what might be inside. But then he noticed something. Right at the bottom of the door, barely visible beneath all the warnings, was a small, dirty smudge. Mud, maybe, or some kind of spilled liquid. It was the sort of mark that made a professional cleaner twitch. Ethan looked at the smudge. He looked at his sandwich. He looked at the mop bucket. He took another bite of sandwich, walked up to the door, and bent down to get a better look at the stain. It was definitely mud, probably from the Helixian research team that had tried to study the door last month. They had treaded dirt all through this whole section. Ethan had spent days cleaning up after them. He reached out to wipe the smudge away with his free hand. The moment his fingers touched the door, everything changed. The green glow from the symbols flared to brilliant white. The geometric seal in the center began to spin, rotating faster and faster with a sound like grinding glass. The entire corridor shook, and alarms began to wail throughout Subbasement 9. Ethan jerked his hand back, stumbling away from the door. His sandwich fell from his other hand, hitting the floor with a sad splat. He stared at the door, which was now blazing with light, so bright he had to shield his eyes. The seal spun faster, pieces clicking into new configurations. Ancient mechanisms, dormant for centuries, rumbled to life. The metal screamed and groaned. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, the door began to open. Ethan stood frozen as the massive portal swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. Not regular darkness, but an absolute void that seemed to swallow light itself. Cold air rushed out, carrying a smell of dust, and something else, something old and indefinable. He should run. Every survival instinct he possessed screamed at him to turn around and sprint down the corridor. But Ethan had never been particularly good at following his survival instincts. That was why he had taken a job on a space station in the first place instead of staying safely on Earth. Also, his sandwich was now on the floor, and he had been really looking forward to eating it. Ethan stood there, hands on his hips, staring at the open door. From somewhere deep inside the chamber, he heard a sound. Not voices, exactly, but something like breathing or wind moving through enormous spaces. He looked at his mop bucket. He looked at the fallen sandwich. He looked at the open door. Then he heard the sound of running feet and panicked voices from down the corridor. The alarms had brought security. They would be here any moment, and when they arrived, they would find the cursed chamber standing open and him standing right next to it. This was going to require a lot of explaining, and Ethan hated explaining things. So, operating on the sort of logic that had gotten him into and out of trouble his entire life, Ethan Cole picked up his mop bucket, stepped over his fallen sandwich, and walked into the cursed chamber. The darkness swallowed him whole. For a moment, there was nothing. Not just absence of light, but absence of everything. No sound, no sensation, no sense of space or time. Ethan existed in a void where even his own heartbeat felt distant and uncertain. Then, slowly, shapes began to emerge from the darkness. He was standing in an enormous chamber, so vast that he could not see the ceiling or the far walls. The floor beneath his feet was smooth and warm, made of the same dark metal as the door, but polished to a mirror shine. Floating in the air all around him were thousands, no, millions of small lights, like stars or fireflies, drifting in complex patterns. In the center of the chamber, perhaps 50 yards ahead, stood a structure. It looked like a throne, or maybe a terminal, or maybe both. It was carved from a single piece of crystalline material that shifted colors as he looked at it, cycling through deep blues and purples and occasionally flashing gold. Ethan set down his mop bucket with a hollow thunk that echoed strangely in the vast space. He stood there, taking in the chamber, waiting for something to happen. The horrors, maybe. The mind-breaking visions. The instant death that had claimed so many others. Nothing happened. He walked a few steps forward. The floating lights moved gently around him, but did not touch him. They gave off a soft warmth that was actually quite pleasant. He walked a few more steps. Still nothing. Ethan began to suspect that maybe, possibly, the cursed chamber's reputation had been somewhat exaggerated. He made his way across the chamber floor toward the central structure, his footsteps echoing in the enormous space. As he got closer, he could see that the throne terminal thing was covered in the same symbols that had been on the door, but these were different. They moved, flowing across the surface like liquid, rearranging themselves constantly. When he was about 10 feet away from the structure, a voice spoke. It came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating in the air and in his bones. It spoke in a language he did not recognize, ancient and complex, full of harmonics that human vocal cords could never reproduce. Ethan stopped walking. He waited politely for the voice to finish speaking. There was a long pause. Then the voice spoke again, this time in a different language. Then another. Then another. It cycled through dozens of languages, each one incomprehensible to Ethan's ears. Finally, after what must have been the 50th attempt, the voice spoke in English. The voice said, "You are human." It was not a question, but Ethan answered anyway. "Yeah," he said. "I am." Another long pause. "This is unexpected," the voice said. "In the 307 years since the sealing, 143 entry attempts have been recorded. None succeeded. Most resulted in death or permanent psychological damage. You are the first being to cross the threshold since the sealing." "Oh," Ethan said. "Sorry about that. I was trying to clean a smudge." "You were trying to clean a smudge?" "Yeah, there was mud on the door. It bothered me." The voice was silent for so long that Ethan began to wonder if he had broken something. Then it spoke again, and if a disembodied ancient voice could sound confused, this one did. "You touched the barrier of eternal warding because there was mud on it." "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds dumb," Ethan said. "But yeah, basically." More silence. The floating lights around Ethan began to move faster, swirling in agitated patterns. "Explain your nature," the voice commanded. "You must possess significant power to breach the barrier. Are you a master of the psychic arts? A warrior of legendary prowess? A being of pure energy? A reality manipulator?" "I'm a janitor," Ethan said. "A janitor? Yeah, I clean stuff. Mop floors, empty trash, that kind of thing. You clean refuse and debris. That's the job, yeah." The lights swirled faster. The entire chamber seemed to be vibrating with some intense emotion that Ethan could not quite identify. "I do not understand," the voice said. "The barrier was designed by the architects of the First Alliance. It was powered by technologies that predate your species by millennia. It was keyed to prevent entry by any being possessing hostile intent, aggressive thought, desire for power, capacity for violence, or any of the myriad negative impulses that drive sentient creatures to conflict and destruction. The barrier reads the fundamental nature of all who approach and reacts accordingly. Those with darkness in their hearts see their deepest fears. Those with violent tendencies face their deaths. Those who seek power are destroyed by it. How did you pass through?" Ethan shrugged. I was mostly thinking about my sandwich. I was hungry." "You were thinking about food." "It was a good sandwich," Ethan said. "Turkey, Swiss, bit of mustard. Had it from the cafeteria on 23. They make them fresh every morning." The voice made a sound like static, or maybe laughter, or maybe the sound of ancient systems trying to process information they were never designed to handle. "You were not thinking aggressive thoughts," the voice said slowly, "or fearful thoughts, or ambitious thoughts. You were thinking about a sandwich. And my sore feet," Ethan added, "and whether I had any beer left at home. Oh, and I was annoyed about having to work late, but not, like, angry. Just sort of generally grumpy." "Generally grumpy. Right. You breached the most sophisticated defense system ever created by one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations because you were hungry, tired, and generally grumpy." Ethan said, When you say it like that, it sounds weird. But yes. The silence that followed was profound. The floating lights had stopped moving entirely. Even the air seemed to be holding its breath. Then the voice spoke again, and this time it definitely sounded like laughter. Deep, resonant laughter that built and built until the entire chamber rang with it. The lights began to dance wildly, spinning in joyous spirals. The crystalline structure flashed through colors like a disco ball. 300 years, the voice said between bursts of laughter. 3 centuries of the galaxy's finest warriors and scholars and psychics trying to breach this chamber. Fleets have been positioned outside, ready to respond if the chamber opened. Wars have nearly started over who had the right to make the next attempt. And it opens for a janitor who wanted to wipe away a smudge. I'm really sorry if I broke something, Ethan said. Should I leave? No, the voice said, still sounding amused. No, please stay. This is the most entertainment I have had in centuries. Tell me, janitor, do you know what this chamber contains? No idea, Ethan admitted. Nobody does. That's kind of the whole point of it being cursed and sealed and stuff. Would you like to know? Ethan considered this. His shift was technically over. He should probably be clocking out. On the other hand, he was already here, and the voice seemed friendly enough, and honestly, he was curious. Sure, he said. Why not? Come forward, the voice said. Approach the archive. Ethan walked up to the crystalline structure. Up close, he could see that it was not solid, but made of countless thin layers, like pages in a book, each one covered in text and images and symbols. This, the voice said, is the last archive of the architects. We were the first spacefaring civilization in this region of the galaxy. We rose to power when your world was still covered in shallow seas and single-celled organisms. We mapped the stars, built wonders, created art and science and philosophy. We thrived for 100,000 years. What happened? Ethan asked. We grew old, the voice said simply. Not individually, but as a civilization. We reached the limits of what we could discover, create, achieve. We became stagnant. And stagnation, for a civilization, is a form of death. So we made a choice. We recorded everything we had learned, everything we had built, every piece of knowledge and wisdom we had gained in our long existence. We placed it all here, in this archive. And then we moved on. Moved on where? Elsewhere, the voice said. Higher dimensions, perhaps. Other realities. We left this existence behind, but we left our legacy for those who would come after. Ethan looked at the archive, at the countless layers of information. So this is like a library? This is the sum total of 100,000 years of accumulated knowledge from the most advanced civilization your galaxy has ever known, the voice said. Contained within this archive is technology that could revolutionize your understanding of physics, medical science that could cure diseases you have not yet discovered, philosophical frameworks that could reshape your civilizations, star charts to galaxies beyond your reach, and much, much more. Huh, Ethan said. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool, the voice repeated. Yes, I suppose it is pretty cool. So why did you seal it up? Ethan asked. If you wanted to leave all this for whoever came after, why make it so hard to get to? Because knowledge is dangerous, the voice said seriously. In the wrong hands. What we have left here could be used to destroy rather than create, to oppress rather than enlighten. We needed to ensure that only beings with pure intentions, those untainted by aggression or greed, could access this chamber. Hence the barrier. But the barrier killed people, Ethan pointed out, or drove them crazy. That seems kind of harsh. The barrier did not kill them, the voice said. Their own natures killed them. The barrier simply reflected back what it found in their hearts. Those who approached with hostile intent saw violence. Those who approached with greed saw themselves consumed by it. The barrier was a mirror, nothing more. If what it reflected was deadly, that was because of what the observer brought to it. So I got through because I didn't bring any of that stuff, Ethan said. You got through, the voice said, because you brought nothing at all except hunger, fatigue, and a desire to clean a smudge. You may be the only being in the galaxy innocent enough to pass through the barrier without triggering its defenses. Ethan was not sure he liked being called innocent, but he supposed there were worse things to be called. Okay, he said. So I'm here. What now? Do you want me to tell people about all this? Let them know the chamber is safe to enter? It is not safe to enter, the voice said. You are an anomaly. If others attempted to follow you, they would still face the barrier's judgment. But you, Janitor, have done something remarkable. You have opened the way. The chamber is no longer sealed. The archive can be accessed. By me. By you. Ethan thought about this. I don't know anything about ancient technology or advanced science or any of that. I'm not a scholar. No, the voice agreed. But you are honest. Straightforward. Uncomplicated. These are rare qualities, particularly in those who seek power or knowledge. I propose an arrangement. What kind of arrangement? You will be the keeper of the archive, the voice said. You will maintain this chamber, keep it clean and functional. In exchange, I will teach you. Not everything, of course. That would take several lifetimes. But enough. Enough that you can begin to understand what we left behind. And when others come, when they inevitably demand access to the archive, you will be the one to decide who is worthy. That's a lot of responsibility, Ethan said. It is. Can I still keep my regular job? I need the paycheck. You may do as you wish, the voice said. The archive is not a prison. You may come and go as you please. Ethan looked around the vast chamber, at the floating lights and the crystalline archive and the impossible darkness beyond. He thought about his small quarters on level 32, his routine of mopping floors and emptying trash, his quiet, simple life. Then he thought about having a second job as the keeper of an ancient alien archive filled with the knowledge of a civilization that had existed for 100,000 years. He thought about being the person who decided who got access to technology that could change the galaxy. It was completely insane. He was completely unqualified. There was no logical reason to say yes. All right, Ethan said. I'll do it. The lights swirled in celebration, and the voice laughed again, warm and approving. Excellent, it said. Welcome, Keeper. Let us begin your education. The news that the cursed chamber had been opened spread through the Galactic Archive Station like wildfire. Within hours, security teams had cordoned off the entire Subbasement 9. Within a day, the Federation Council had been notified. Within a week, delegates from 24 major civilizations had arrived, all demanding to know how the barrier had been breached and what lay beyond. The story of Ethan Cole, the human janitor who had walked into the cursed chamber while eating a sandwich, became the subject of intense scrutiny, disbelief, and no small amount of ridicule. The Trilaxian ambassador, a towering being covered in crystalline armor, refused to believe it. This is a deception, she declared at the emergency council meeting. A human janitor could not have breached the barrier where our greatest warriors failed. He must have used some kind of technology. A device. Trickery. We have reviewed all security footage. The station's head of security, a Velnari named Crodix, said wearily. Cole carried no devices except his communicator, which was standard issue. He simply walked up to the door and touched it. The barrier opened. Impossible, declared the Mindari representative, a being of pure thought currently inhabiting a crystalline vessel. The barrier was designed to read intent. No being approaches such a door without intent. His intent, Crodix said, was to clean a smudge. The silence that followed was broken only by the Helixian delegate, who began making a sound that might have been laughter or might have been choking. It was hard to tell with Helixians. This is absurd, the Trilaxian ambassador said. We demand access to the chamber immediately. If the barrier has truly been breached, then the archive must be secured by proper authorities. The archive has a keeper, Crodix said. Who? The human janitor. The Trilaxian ambassador's crystalline armor flared with angry red light. Unacceptable. A human? A janitor? This is the most significant archaeological discovery in galactic history. It cannot be left in the hands of an uneducated maintenance worker. Nevertheless, Crodix said, Cole is the only being who can enter the chamber without triggering the barrier. And according to his report, the archive itself has designated him as keeper. We cannot override that designation. Then we will force entry, the Trilaxian declared. We will cut through the walls if necessary. Attempted forcible entry will trigger the station's self-destruct protocols. The station's director, an elderly Vorin named Nexus, said calmly. The Federation Charter is very clear on this point. Sealed chambers of historical significance are protected by the highest security measures. Any attempt to breach them through force will be met with immediate defensive action. The Trilaxian ambassador made a sound like grinding metal. This is intolerable. I agree, said the Mindari representative. However, we must adapt to the circumstances. If the human is the only one who can enter safely, then we must negotiate with the human. Negotiate with the janitor, the Trilaxian said flatly. Yes. The ambassador was silent for a long moment. Then, with great reluctance, she said, Very well. Summon this Cole. Let us see what manner of being the archive has chosen as its keeper. Ethan was trying to mop the corridor outside the curse chamber when 6 heavily armed security officers appeared and informed him that the Federation Council wanted to speak with him. Immediately. Can I finish mopping first? He asked. No, the security chief said. Can I at least put the mop away? The security chief looked at the mop, then at Ethan, then back at the mop. Fine, but hurry. 10 minutes later, Ethan found himself standing in the station's primary conference room, facing a panel of beings who represented some of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. He was still wearing his maintenance jumpsuit, which had a stain on the shoulder from where he had spilled coffee that morning. He had not had time to shave in 3 days. He was acutely aware that he probably did not smell great. The Trilaxian ambassador stared at him with eyes that glowed like superheated metal. You are Ethan Cole. Yes, ma'am, Ethan said. You are a maintenance worker. Yes, ma'am. And you opened the cursed chamber by accident. Well, I wouldn't say accident exactly. I meant to clean the door. I just didn't mean to open it. The Trilaxian made that grinding sound again. Explain how you breached the barrier. I touched the door, Ethan said. That is not an explanation. I mean, that's literally what happened. I touched the door opened. I don't know what else to tell you. The Mindari representative leaned forward, its crystalline vessel glowing softly. When you approached the door, what were you thinking? What was your mental state? I was thinking about my sandwich, Ethan said, and how my feet hurt, and whether I had any beer at home. You were not thinking about the power contained within, the knowledge, the secrets. I didn't know what was inside, Ethan pointed out. Nobody did. That's why it was sealed. But you must have been curious. Not really, Ethan admitted. I was mostly focused on finishing my shift and going home. The delegates exchanged glances. The Helixian representative, a serpentine being coiled in a corner, spoke up. This is consistent with our theoretical models. The barrier was designed to respond to aggressive or acquisitive mental states. An individual thinking only of mundane matters would present no threat signature. So the chamber can only be opened by fools, the Trilaxians said, or by the truly pure of heart, the Mindari countered. The ancient texts speak of this concept, the innocent threshold, a defense that can only be breached by those who do not seek to breach it. Regardless, the Trilaxians said, turning back to Ethan, the chamber is now open. The archive must be examined, cataloged, secured. You will provide us with full access. No, Ethan said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. No, the Trilaxian repeated. The archive appointed me as keeper, Ethan said. That means I decide who gets access. You are a janitor. I'm also the keeper of the archive. I can be both. The Trilaxian ambassador rose from her seat, her armor blazing with aggressive colors. You dare to deny the Federation Council access to the most significant discovery in galactic history. I'm not denying anyone anything, Ethan said, keeping his voice calm despite his racing heart. But I'm also not just throwing the doors open to anyone who wants to walk in. The archive was sealed for a reason. If the architects wanted just anyone to have access to their knowledge, they wouldn't have built the barrier. The architects are gone, the Trilaxians said. But their archive isn't, and they left someone to protect it. Me. So yeah, I'm going to be careful about who I let in. The Mindari representative made a sound like chimes. The human is correct. The designation of keeper is not arbitrary. It carries responsibility and authority. We must respect that. You would have us bow to the authority of a maintenance worker? The Trilaxian demanded. I would have us respect the will of the architects, the Mindari said. They built the barrier. They chose the criteria for access. If Cole meets those criteria, then he is the rightful keeper, regardless of his occupation. The Trilaxian looked like she wanted to argue further, but the Voran director, Nexus, intervened. Perhaps we can reach a compromise. Cole, would you be willing to work with researchers to allow supervised access under your guardianship? Ethan thought about this. He thought about the voice in the chamber, the archive's trust in him, and the responsibility he had accepted. He also thought about the fact that he was one human janitor facing down the combined power of dozens of civilizations, and that he needed to pick his battles carefully. Yeah, he said, I can do that, but I need to approve each person who enters, and they have to follow my rules while they're in there. Your rules, the Trilaxian said. My chamber, my rules, Ethan said. That's the deal. Another tense silence. Then, one by one, the delegates nodded their agreement. Even the Trilaxian, though she looked like it physically pained her to do so. Very well, Nexus said. Cole will serve as keeper of the archive. Researchers who wish to access the chamber must submit requests to him for approval. All activities within the chamber will be supervised by Cole and subject to his authority. Great, Ethan said. Can I go now? I still have to finish mopping Subbasement 9. The delegates stared at him. You intend to continue your janitorial duties? The Mindari asked. Yeah, why wouldn't I? I still need the paycheck. Being keeper doesn't pay anything. You could demand any salary, the Trilaxian said. You have leverage now. Power. I have a job, Ethan said. And also another job, I guess. But I like the first job. It's simple. I'm good at it. Why would I quit? He left the conference room to the sound of stunned silence. Over the following weeks, Ethan settled into his new dual role. During his regular shifts, he cleaned the station as he always had, mopping floors and emptying trash and wiping down surfaces. During his off hours, he spent time in the archive, learning from the voice, which asked him to call it Architect Prime. The archive was vast beyond comprehension. It contained detailed records of 100,000 years of civilization, including millions of technological designs, billions of individual works of art and literature, and countless philosophical and scientific texts. Architect Prime estimated that a single being could not read everything in the archive in 1,000 lifetimes. But Architect Prime was a patient teacher, and Ethan turned out to be a better student than either of them expected. He had a practical, hands-on approach to learning that worked well with the archive systems. When Architect Prime showed him ancient technology, Ethan asked how it worked, then tried to build small versions himself using materials from the station's workshops. When Architect Prime explained scientific principles, Ethan related them to things he understood, comparing complex physics to the behavior of mop water or the way cleaning chemicals reacted. You have an unusual mind, Architect Prime observed one evening, watching Ethan successfully construct a small gravity manipulator from spare parts. You lack formal education, yet you grasp concepts intuitively. You solve problems not through calculation, but through experimentation and observation. I'm good with my hands, Ethan said, adjusting a connection. Always have been. Give me something to build or fix. I can usually figure it out. The architects were like that. At the beginning, Architect Prime said, before we became philosophers and theorists, we were makers, builders. We shaped the galaxy with our hands before we shaped it with our minds. The gravity manipulator hummed to life, and a small sphere of metal began to float above the workbench. Ethan grinned. Still got it, he said. Meanwhile, the requests for access to the archive began to pour in. Scientists wanted to study the technology. Historians wanted to examine the records. Military leaders wanted to see the weapon designs. Ethan reviewed each request carefully, often spending hours discussing them with Architect Prime. Most requests were denied. This one wants weapons, Ethan said, reading a petition from a Trilaxian military commander. He says it's for defense, but he also mentions maintaining regional supremacy. That's a no. This researcher wants medical technology, Architect Prime noted, highlighting another request. Her credentials are impressive. Yeah, but look at who's funding her research, Ethan said, pointing to a line in the document. That's a pharmaceutical company. They'll patent whatever they find and sell it for profit. Medical knowledge should be free. No, this one is a philosopher, Architect Prime said. He simply wishes to learn. Ethan read the request. The philosopher, a Mindari named Kelver, wanted to study the architect's ethical frameworks. His letter was thoughtful and humble, acknowledging his own limitations and expressing genuine curiosity rather than demands. Okay, Ethan said. He can come in, but just for a few hours. We'll see how it goes. Kelver's visit was the first real test of Ethan's role as keeper. The Mindari philosopher arrived nervous and excited, barely able to contain his enthusiasm. Ethan met him at the chamber door, which now opened at his touch without triggering any alarms or defenses. Thank you, Kelver said, his crystalline vessel glowing with emotion. Thank you for this opportunity. I will not waste it. Just be respectful, Ethan said. And don't touch anything without asking first. They entered the chamber together. Kelver stopped just past the threshold, overwhelmed by the sheer scope of what he was seeing. It's real, he whispered. The archives of the first ones. I thought I would never see this day. First ones? Ethan asked. That is what we call them, Kelver said. The architects. The civilization that came before all others. They are legends to us. Myths. To see proof that they were real, that they left this behind, it is like meeting your gods. They weren't gods, Ethan said. Just people. Really old people who knew a lot of stuff. Kelver laughed, a sound like wind chimes. You have such a casual relationship with the divine, human. I have a casual relationship with most things, Ethan admitted. He led Kelver to a section of the archive that contained philosophical texts. Architect Prime manifested as a holographic presence, appearing as a tall, slender figure made of light, and began guiding the Mindari through the collection. Ethan watched for a while, then got bored and started sweeping the floor. You are cleaning, Kelver observed, looking up from an ancient text on the nature of consciousness. Floor's dusty, Ethan said. Figured I might as well take care of it while I'm here. The keeper of the greatest archive in the galaxy is sweeping the floor. Someone's got to do it. Kelver stared at him for a long moment, then returned to his reading, shaking his head in wonder. The visit went well. Kelver was respectful, asked thoughtful questions, and treated the archive with reverence. When his time was up, he thanked Ethan profusely and promised to write a paper about what he had learned, giving full credit to the architects and to Ethan for allowing access. Word spread that the archive could be accessed if one approached the keeper properly. More requests came in. Ethan approved a handful, always watching carefully, always ready to revoke access if anyone stepped out of line. He denied a famous scientist who had a reputation for claiming others' discoveries as his own. He denied a wealthy collector who wanted to purchase artifacts. He denied a religious leader who wanted to use the archive to prove his faith superior to all others. Each denial caused controversy. Each approval was scrutinized. Ethan found himself at the center of a growing storm of political pressure, academic jealousy, and cultural conflict. The Trilaxian ambassador, in particular, seemed to take personal offense at his continued refusals to grant her people unrestricted access. You are obstructing progress, she told him at another council meeting. My people have the most advanced scientific infrastructure in this sector. We could unlock the archive's secrets in a fraction of the time it would take others. The archive isn't a race, Ethan said. And secrets aren't meant to be unlocked quickly. They're meant to be understood carefully. You speak as if you have wisdom to share, the ambassador said. You are a janitor. You clean floors. What possible understanding could you have of the archive's significance? I'm the keeper, Ethan said quietly. The archive chose me. Not because I'm smart or powerful or important, but because I'm simple enough to listen when it talks. Because I don't want to use what's in there for myself. And because I know that knowledge isn't about who can unlock it fastest. It's about who can use it responsibly. The ambassador had no response to that. Months passed. Ethan continued his double life, splitting his time between mopping floors and guarding the greatest treasure in the galaxy. He got better at both jobs. The station had never been cleaner, and the archive had never been better protected. Architect Prime proved to be an excellent companion. The ancient intelligence had a dry sense of humor and a vast reservoir of stories about the architect's rise and fall. It taught Ethan not just about technology, but about philosophy, art, music, and the complex social structures that had sustained a civilization for 100,000 years. Why did you really leave? Ethan asked one night, sitting on the floor of the archive with a sandwich and a beer. You said you grew stagnant, but that seems like giving up. We did not give up, Architect Prime said. We transformed. There comes a point in every civilization's development when they must choose, stagnate and die, or transcend and evolve. We chose evolution. But you left everything behind. We left everything ahead, Architect Prime corrected. For those who would come after. Your people, Ethan, are young. So young. But you have potential. All the younger races do. You are where we were millions of years ago, full of energy and curiosity and foolishness. You make mistakes we made. You stumble where we stumbled. But you also have something we lost. What's that? Spontaneity. Chaos. The ability to do things for no reason other than a sandwich and sore feet. Ethan laughed. You're never going to let me live that down, are you? Why would I? It is the most remarkable thing that has happened in this chamber in 300 years. As Ethan's reputation as keeper grew, he began to notice something strange. The people he allowed into the archive, the ones who treated it with respect and learned from it genuinely, started to change. Not dramatically, but subtly. They became more thoughtful, more humble, more willing to share what they learned rather than hoard it. Kelver, the Mindari philosopher, began teaching free classes on ancient wisdom, making knowledge available to anyone who wanted to learn. A Helixian engineer whom Ethan had approved started publishing open-source designs based on archive technology, refusing to patent anything. A young Voran researcher used medical knowledge from the archive to develop treatments she then distributed freely to impoverished colonies. It was as if the archive's influence was spreading, rippling out from the chamber through the people who entered it. Knowledge shared became wisdom, and wisdom became action. But not everyone was happy about this. The Trilaxian ambassador's frustration reached a breaking point when Ethan denied access to a team of military scientists she had personally endorsed. She demanded a hearing before the Federation Council, accusing Ethan of bias, incompetence, and obstruction. He has no qualifications, she declared before the assembled delegates. No credentials, no formal education. He makes decisions based on instinct and whim. The archive is too important to be left in such hands. Cole's decisions have been sound, the Mindari representative countered. Those he has approved have used the knowledge responsibly. Those he has denied have proven, time and again, to have ulterior motives. He denied my scientists, the ambassador said. Are you saying I have ulterior motives? Your scientists were planning to weaponize archive technology, Ethan said quietly. I saw it in their proposal. They wanted to study energy weapons and shielding systems. Not for defense, for offense. The proposal specifically mentioned tactical superiority and subjugation protocols. The ambassador's armor flared red. Those documents were classified. How did you access them? I didn't, Ethan said. Architect Prime did. The archive can access any digital system on this station. It's one of its basic functions. When someone submits a request, Architect Prime investigates their background, their funding sources, their true intentions. We don't just read what people tell us. We look at what they don't tell us. This revelation caused an uproar. Several delegates objected to the invasion of privacy. Others supported the thoroughness of the vetting process. The argument raged for hours. Finally, the Voran director Nexus called for order. The question before us is simple, he said. Has Cole fulfilled his duties as keeper appropriately? Has he protected the archive while allowing access to those worthy of it? The evidence suggests he has. His decisions, while sometimes controversial, have been consistent and principled. I see no reason to remove him from his position. I second this assessment, the Mindari representative said. One by one, the other delegates agreed. Even those who disagreed with specific decisions acknowledged that Ethan had acted in good faith and with genuine care for the archive's purpose. Only the Trilaxian ambassador dissented. This is a mistake, she said. You are giving too much power to one individual, especially one so unsuited for the responsibility. Power is always given to individuals, Nexus said. The question is whether they use it wisely. Cole has done so. That is sufficient. The hearing ended. Ethan kept his position, but he knew the ambassador would not give up so easily. She was determined to gain access to the archive's military secrets, and she would find another way to get them. He was right. 2 weeks later, Ethan arrived at the archive to find the door standing open. Not just unlocked, but disabled. Someone had bypassed its systems, forced it to open without his authorization. He ran inside, heart pounding. The vast chamber was empty, but he could see signs of intrusion. Footprints in the dust he had not yet swept. Scorch marks on the floor near the central archive. Someone had tried to access the crystalline structure directly. Architect Prime. Ethan shouted. Are you okay? The voice responded immediately, but it sounded strained, weakened. I am undamaged, but the archive has been accessed. Someone breached the secondary protocols and attempted to download military data. Who? I do not know. They used sophisticated masking technology, but I was able to prevent them from taking anything. They fled when I activated the chamber's defense systems. Ethan looked around and saw evidence of those defenses. Scorch marks on the walls, melted equipment, signs of energy weapons discharge. Whoever had tried to rob the archive had been met with serious resistance. We need to report this, Ethan said. Agreed. But Ethan, there is something you must understand. This will not be the last attempt. The knowledge contained here is too valuable. There will always be those who seek to take it by force. You cannot guard the archive alone forever. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that we need to change our approach. Rather than hoarding the archive's knowledge, we should begin to share it. Not everything, and not all at once, but carefully, deliberately, to those who will use it for the benefit of all rather than the advantage of a few. That's what we've been doing, Ethan said. On a small scale, I propose something larger. A project. We could create a research initiative, sponsored by the Federation but independent of any single government. We could invite scholars from all civilizations to participate, sharing the archive's knowledge in a controlled, ethical manner. This way, the benefits would spread to all, and no one would feel excluded or desperate enough to steal. Ethan thought about this. It made sense. The more people who tried to steal from the archive, the harder his job became. But if knowledge was shared openly, there would be less incentive for theft. Okay, he said. Let's do it. How do we start? First, Architect Prime said, we need to find out who tried to steal from us. Then we make them an example. The investigation did not take long. Architect Prime's security systems had recorded everything, including biometric data from the intruders. Within a day, station security had identified them, a team of Trilaxian commandos operating under direct orders from their government. The revelation caused a galactic incident. The Trilaxian government denied everything at first, then grudgingly admitted that a rogue faction had acted without authorization. The ambassador herself claimed ignorance, though few believed her. The Federation Council convened an emergency session. The Trilaxians were sanctioned, forbidden from making any further requests for archive access for the next 50 years. Their commandos were arrested and tried for theft, espionage, and violation of sacred space. But the damage had been done. Trust in the archive's security was shaken. Other civilizations, seeing how close the Trilaxians had come to success, began plotting their own attempts. Ethan realized that Architect Prime had been right. They needed to change their approach. Hoarding knowledge only made it more attractive to thieves. So they announced the Archive Initiative, an open research program that would make portions of the archive's knowledge available to qualified scholars from all civilizations. The program would be overseen by Ethan and a council of representatives from neutral academic institutions. Technologies would be shared freely but with strict ethical guidelines. Anyone caught misusing archive knowledge would be permanently banned. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some praised the initiative as a breakthrough in galactic cooperation. Others decried it as naive and dangerous. The Trilaxian ambassador, still bitter over her government's sanctions, called it the human's folly. But slowly, the program took shape. Scholars applied, were vetted, and were granted access to specific portions of the archive. Research teams formed, mixing species and disciplines in combinations that had never existed before. A Mindari philosopher worked with a Helixian engineer to develop a new form of transportation based on archive principles. A Voran medical researcher collaborated with human doctors to create treatments for previously incurable diseases. Knowledge flowed from the archive like water from a broken dam, spreading across the galaxy, touching countless lives. And Ethan, the human janitor who had stumbled into the cursed chamber looking for a sandwich, found himself at the center of the greatest knowledge-sharing initiative in galactic history. It was exhausting work. He barely had time to mop anymore. His supervisor Kix complained constantly about the state of Sub-Basement 9, though Ethan suspected the Valnari was secretly proud of him. Ethan's days became a blur of meetings, decisions, and endless review of research proposals. But he kept going, because he understood something important. The archive's knowledge was not meant to be locked away. The architects had not sealed it to keep it secret, but to keep it safe until someone worthy could share it properly. He was not the smartest person for the job, or the most qualified, or the most powerful. But he was honest and careful, and he genuinely cared about doing the right thing. Sometimes, apparently, that was enough. Years passed. The Archive initiative grew from a small program into a massive interstellar project involving thousands of researchers and hundreds of institutions. Technologies developed from archive knowledge began to transform life across the galaxy. Faster ships, better medicine, cleaner energy, more efficient food production. The standard of living rose for billions of beings. There were setbacks, of course. Some researchers abused their access and were banned. Some governments tried to militarize archive technology and were stopped. There were scandals, controversies, and at least 3 assassination attempts on Ethan by groups who felt the archive should remain sealed. But mostly, there was progress. Real, measurable, beneficial progress. Ethan aged. His hair started going gray at the temples. His back hurt more often. He bought reading glasses and actually used them. He was not young anymore, and the weight of his responsibilities had become familiar, if not comfortable. On the 5th anniversary of the Archive Initiative, the Federation Council held a ceremony in his honor. Delegates from across the galaxy gathered to recognize his work. Even the Trilaxian ambassador, replaced now by a younger and more diplomatic successor, attended and gave a grudging speech acknowledging that the initiative had been successful. Ethan stood on the stage, wearing a suit that did not quite fit, looking out at the audience of important people, and felt deeply, profoundly uncomfortable. He had never wanted recognition. He had just wanted to do his job. When it was his turn to speak, he kept it brief. "I'm not a scholar," he said. "I'm not a scientist or a philosopher or a politician. I'm a janitor who got lucky. But I learned something from the archive, from Architect Prime, and from the thousands of researchers who have passed through its doors. Knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is responsibility. The more you know, the more you're responsible for using that knowledge wisely." The architects understood this. That's why they built the barrier. Not to keep people out, but to make sure that whoever got in understood the weight of what they were taking on. He paused, looking around the room. "We've shared a lot of knowledge over the past 5 years. We've changed lives, saved lives, made the galaxy a better place. But we've also been careful. We've been deliberate. We've said no more often than we've said yes. And that's going to continue. Because the archive isn't a treasure to be plundered. It's a trust to be honored. Thank you." The applause was thunderous. Ethan stepped down from the stage as quickly as he could and slipped out a side door before anyone could trap him in conversation. He found Architect Prime waiting for him in the archive chamber. The ancient intelligence had manifested in its holographic form, standing beside the crystalline structure at the chamber's heart. "That was a good speech," Architect Prime said. "I hate speeches," Ethan replied, loosening his tie. "I know, but you did well." The architects would have been proud. "You think so? I know so. You have honored their legacy better than they could have hoped. Knowledge is spreading. Lives are improving. And you have done it all while maintaining the integrity of what we left behind. That is remarkable." Ethan sat down on the floor, his usual spot. He was still wearing the uncomfortable suit, but he did not care. This was his real office, here in the archive, sitting on the floor and talking with an ancient intelligence that had become his closest friend. "I couldn't have done it without you," Ethan said. "Nor I without you," Architect Prime replied. "We are a good team, Keeper." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, surrounded by the floating lights and the weight of 100,000 years of knowledge. "What happens when I'm gone?" Ethan asked eventually. "I'm not going to live forever. Humans don't. Who takes over when I die?" "We will find someone," Architect Prime said. "Someone like you. Simple, honest, uncomplicated. Someone who approaches doors because there is a smudge, not because there is power behind them. That's a pretty specific job requirement." "It is. But such people exist. We will find one when the time comes. Perhaps another janitor. Or a cook. Or a gardener. Someone whose hands are calloused from work, whose heart is clear of ambition, whose mind is focused on the immediate and practical rather than the grand and theoretical. So basically, someone who doesn't care about all this ancient knowledge stuff. Exactly. Ethan laughed. The Trilaxian ambassador would hate that. All the more reason to do it. They laughed together, the ancient and the mundane, the eternal and the temporary, keeper and archive united in purpose and friendship. Outside the chamber, the galaxy continued its endless dance. Ships traveled between stars. Civilizations rose and fell and rose again. Wars were fought and peace was made and wars were fought again. The vast machinery of existence ground on, indifferent to individual lives. But in one small chamber, deep in the forgotten levels of a space station, human and archive worked together to make the galaxy just a little bit better. One shared piece of knowledge at a time. One careful decision at a time. One day at a time. It was not glorious work. It was not celebrated in songs or remembered in legends. But it was important work, done by someone who understood that the best way to honor great knowledge was not to hoard it, not to weaponize it, not to use it for personal gain, but to share it carefully with those who needed it most. Ethan Cole, the human janitor who had walked into a cursed chamber eating a sandwich, had become exactly what the galaxy needed. A keeper who kept things clean, simple, and functional. Who swept the floors and guarded the knowledge and made sure that the light of ancient wisdom spread to illuminate the darkness of ignorance. He was not a hero. He was not a genius. He was not special in any way that mattered to most people. But he was good at his job. Both of them. And in the end, that was enough. 10 more years passed. Ethan was in his late 40s now, his hair more gray than brown, his body marked by the wear of decades of physical labor. But he was healthy, happy, and still doing the work he loved. He mopped floors in the morning and managed the archive initiative in the afternoon. He ate turkey sandwiches for lunch and made decisions that affected billions of lives. He was, by any objective measure, one of the most influential beings in the galaxy. He was also, by his own measure, just a guy doing his job. The archive initiative had grown beyond anything he had imagined. Hundreds of research institutions across dozens of worlds now participated. Technologies derived from archive knowledge had revolutionized everything from medicine to manufacturing. The initiative had prevented 2 wars by providing both sides with technology that made conflict obsolete. It had saved countless lives through new medical treatments. It had opened up new frontiers for exploration and discovery. But Ethan had not changed his routine. He still lived in the same small quarters on level 32. He still ate at the same cafeteria, still drank beer on weekends, still watched old Earth movies on his battered tablet. Fame and influence had not corrupted him because he had never wanted fame or influence in the first place. One morning, while mopping a corridor on level 15, Ethan was approached by a young human woman. She looked to be in her early 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of bright, curious eyes that reminded him of researchers who loved learning for its own sake. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Ethan Cole?" "Yeah," Ethan said, pausing in his mopping. "Who's asking?" "My name is Maya Foster. I'm a graduate student studying xenoarchaeology at the Luna Institute. I've been following your work with the Archive Initiative. It's incredible what you've accomplished." "Thanks," Ethan said. "But it's not really my work. I just manage things. The researchers do the actual accomplishing." "That's not what they say," Maya said. "I've talked to dozens of people who have worked with the archive. They all say the same thing. You're the reason it works. Because you're fair, because you're thoughtful, because you genuinely care about using the knowledge responsibly." Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just try to do what's right." "That's exactly what I mean," Maya said. "Most people in positions of power don't just try to do what's right. They try to do what benefits them. You're different." "I'm not in a position of power," Ethan said. "I'm a janitor." "You're the keeper of the most important archive in galactic history," Maya corrected. "That's definitely a position of power." "If you say so." Ethan returned to his mopping. "Was there something you needed? Or did you just want to chat about how I'm secretly powerful?" Maya laughed. "Actually, I was hoping to apply for archive access. I want to study the architects' early civilization before they became spacefaring. Nobody's done a comprehensive analysis of that period yet, and I think it could provide valuable insights into how civilizations develop." That's a pretty ambitious project for a graduate student. I know, but I'm serious about it. I've been preparing for years. I've learned 4 ancient languages. I've studied everything we know about the architects. I've written 3 papers on pre-space flight civilization development. I'm ready. Ethan studied her. He had gotten good at reading people over the years, at seeing past their words to their true intentions. Maya reminded him of the best researchers he had approved, passionate but humble, ambitious but ethical, excited about knowledge for its own sake rather than what it could do for her. All right, he said. Submit a formal application through the initiative's website. Include your academic credentials, your research proposal, and 3 references. I'll review it. Really? Maya's face lit up. Thank you. I mean, I know you might still say no after reviewing it, but just the chance to be considered is amazing. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, Ethan said. I reject about 90% of applications. I know, but I've got a good feeling about this. She hurried away, practically bouncing with excitement. Ethan watched her go, smiling slightly. He hoped she was right. The archive could use more researchers like her. 2 weeks later, Ethan approved Maya Foster's application. Her proposal was solid. Her credentials were impressive, and Architect Prime had investigated her background and found nothing concerning. She was, by all accounts, exactly the kind of researcher the initiative needed. Maya's first visit to the archive was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. Ethan met her at the chamber door, now as familiar to him as his own quarters. Ready? He asked. Absolutely, Maya said. She was trying to hide her nervousness, but Ethan could see it in the way she kept fidgeting with her tablet. Don't be nervous, he said. The archive is amazing, but it's also just a place. Treat it with respect, but don't be afraid of it. He touched the door, and it swung open silently. Maya gasped as she saw the vast chamber beyond, the floating lights, the crystalline archive at the center. Ethan had seen that reaction hundreds of times, but it never got old. There was something deeply satisfying about introducing people to wonder. Architect Prime manifested as they entered, its holographic form materializing beside the archive structure. Welcome, Maya Foster, it said. I am Architect Prime, guardian and interface of this archive. Ethan speaks highly of your work. I do, Ethan said. You approved her application. That is high praise from you. Maya laughed nervously. It's an honor to meet you, Architect Prime. I've read everything ever written about you. Well, everything that's publicly available. Then you know more about me than I know about myself, Architect Prime said. Much of what has been written is speculation and mythology. But that is the nature of legend. Now, let us discuss your research. You wish to study our early period? Yes, Maya said, launching into an explanation of her project. Ethan listened for a while, then quietly excused himself and began sweeping the floor. He had learned that researchers worked better when he was not hovering over them. His presence made them nervous, made them feel watched and judged. Better to seem occupied with other tasks while Architect Prime handled the actual research assistance. Maya's visits became regular. She came twice a week, spending hours poring over ancient records, taking meticulous notes, asking thoughtful questions. Ethan often worked in the background during her sessions, sweeping or dusting or performing routine maintenance on the archive systems. Sometimes they chatted between her research sessions, casual conversations about nothing in particular. She told him about her life on Luna, about her family, about her dreams of becoming a professor and teaching the next generation of xenoarchaeologists. He told her about Earth, about the small town in Oregon where he had grown up, about the series of odd jobs that had eventually led him to space. They were easy conversations, the kind that happen naturally between people who spend a lot of time in the same space. One day, about 3 months into Maya's research project, she looked up from her work and said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure," Ethan said. He was oiling the hinges on a storage cabinet. "Do you ever regret it? Becoming the keeper? You could have done so much with your life. You could have been rich, famous, powerful. Instead, you're still mopping floors and living in tiny quarters and working 2 jobs. Don't you ever wonder what might have been?" Ethan thought about this. It was not the first time someone had asked him that question, but it was the first time in a while. "No," he said finally. "I don't regret it. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm good at this. I'm happy doing this. Why would I want anything else?" But you gave up so much. Did I? I have a job I like, a purpose that matters, and a friend who's been alive for 100,000 years. He gestured to Architect Prime, who made a sound like a chuckle. I live on a space station and get to meet interesting people from all over the galaxy. I'm part of something bigger than myself. That's more than most people get. I'm lucky. You really believe that? Of course I do. It's true. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're a very unusual person, Ethan Cole." "I'm really not," Ethan said. "I'm completely ordinary. That's kind of the point. If someone like me can end up doing important work, then anyone can. You don't have to be special or gifted or chosen. You just have to show up and try to do the right thing." The janitor philosophy. I prefer to call it the keep it simple philosophy. But yeah, basically. Maya's research project took 2 years to complete. When she finally published her findings, a comprehensive analysis of the architect's pre-spaceflight civilization, it was hailed as groundbreaking. She won awards, was offered positions at prestigious institutions, and became recognized as one of the leading experts on ancient civilizations. She sent Ethan a copy of her published work with a personal note. "Thank you for believing in me. You changed my life." Ethan read the note, smiled, and filed the book on a shelf in his quarters alongside dozens of other publications that had resulted from archive research. Each one represented a researcher he had approved, a project he had supported, a small piece of knowledge shared with the galaxy. He was proud of that shelf, more proud than he would admit to most people. Time continued its relentless march. The Archive Initiative celebrated its 10th anniversary, then its 15th. Ethan's hair went fully gray. He needed reading glasses for even basic tasks now. His knees hurt more often. He was getting old. But the work continued. New researchers came and went. New discoveries emerged from the archive's depths. The galaxy kept changing, kept improving, kept growing in knowledge and capability. And Ethan kept mopping floors and reviewing applications and making decisions that affected billions of lives. One evening, Ethan was sitting in the archive with Architect Prime, as had become his habit. He was eating dinner, a simple meal of rice and vegetables from the cafeteria, when Architect Prime spoke. "We should discuss succession planning," the ancient intelligence said. Ethan paused mid-bite. "Succession planning? You are aging, Ethan. Human lifespans are limited. We need to consider who will replace you when you can no longer serve as keeper." "I'm not that old," Ethan protested. "I've got years left." "Yes, but it is prudent to plan ahead. The transition of keepers is a significant event. We should handle it carefully, deliberately, just as we have handled everything else." Ethan set down his fork. He had known this conversation was coming eventually. He had just been avoiding thinking about it. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "We should begin training a successor. Someone who can learn from you, work alongside you, and eventually take over when the time comes. It should be someone you trust, someone who shares your values and your approach to the archive. Do you have someone in mind?" "Actually," Architect Prime said, "I do. Maya Foster." Ethan blinked. "Maya? The xenoarchaeologist. She reminds me of you, in many ways. Passionate, but grounded. Ambitious, but ethical. She cares about knowledge for its own sake, not for what it can do for her. She is also young enough to serve for decades after you retire. I believe she would make an excellent keeper." Ethan thought about this. Maya had continued to visit the archive regularly even after completing her initial research project. She had become something of a fixture, a trusted presence who often helped other researchers navigate the archive systems. She was respectful, thoughtful, and genuinely cared about the architect's legacy. "She's not a janitor," Ethan said. "No, but perhaps that is acceptable. You have set the precedent. The next keeper does not need to be exactly like you. They simply need to share your core values. What if she doesn't want the job? Then we find someone else. But I suggest we ask her first." They asked her the following week. Maya's reaction was everything Ethan had hoped for: shock, disbelief, and a profound sense of unworthiness. "Me?" she said. "You want me to be the keeper? I can't do that. I'm not qualified. I'm just a researcher." "I was just a janitor," Ethan pointed out. "That's different." "How?" "You're Ethan Cole. You're a legend. You opened the curse chamber. You built the archive initiative from nothing. You've changed the entire galaxy. And before I did any of that, I was just a guy who mopped floors," Ethan said. "You can do this job, Maya. I know you can. You have everything it takes: integrity, judgment, and a genuine respect for knowledge. That's all you need. But what about my research? My teaching? You can keep doing those things. I kept mopping floors. The job of keeper isn't full-time. It's just, well, it's another job. Maya looked at Architect Prime, who had manifested beside them. What do you think? I think you would honor the legacy of the architects. Architect Prime said simply. That is the highest compliment I can give. Maya was silent for a long time, struggling with the decision. Finally, she said, can I think about it? Of course, Ethan said. Take all the time you need. She thought about it for 2 weeks, during which Ethan went back to his routine and tried not to worry. He had meant what he said. If Maya did not want the job, they would find someone else. But he hoped she would say yes. She was perfect for it. Finally, Maya returned to the archive and found Ethan performing routine maintenance on the lighting system. I'll do it, she said without preamble. I'll be the next keeper. But I have one condition. What's that? You have to train me. Really train me. Teach me everything you know about running the initiative, making decisions, dealing with the politics. I don't want to screw this up. Deal? Ethan said, climbing down from the ladder where he had been working. When do you want to start? Right now? Right now works. So began the training of Maya Foster. For the next 3 years, she shadowed Ethan, learning every aspect of the keeper's duties. She attended meetings with him, reviewed applications alongside him, and spent countless hours in the archive learning from Architect Prime. She learned not just the technical aspects of the job, but the philosophy behind it. That knowledge was a trust, not a treasure, and that the greatest power was knowing when to say no. On Ethan's 60th birthday, a quiet ceremony was held in the archive chamber. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered to witness the official transfer of keeper duties from Ethan Cole to Maya Foster. It was a simple ceremony, as Ethan insisted all ceremonies involving him should be. Maya placed her hand on the crystalline archive structure, and Architect Prime formally recognized her as the new keeper. Ethan stepped back, feeling lighter than he had in years. The weight of responsibility, carried for so long, had finally been lifted. How does it feel? He asked Maya afterward. Terrifying, she admitted. But also right. Thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for accepting it, Ethan said. The archive is in good hands. Ethan retired from both his jobs that day. He moved back to Earth, to a small house near the Oregon coast where he had grown up. He spent his days walking on the beach, reading books, and occasionally consulting with Maya when she needed advice. He lived simply, happily, content in the knowledge that he had done his job well. The archive initiative continued to flourish under Maya's leadership. Knowledge continued to spread. Lives continued to improve. The galaxy continued to grow wiser and more compassionate. And in a small house on Earth, an old man who had once been the most important janitor in the galaxy sat on his porch, eating a turkey sandwich, watching the sunset, and smiling at the memory of the day he had walked into a cursed chamber because there was a smudge on the door. He had been just a simple man doing a simple job. But sometimes, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.